Welcome to these videos presented to you by the Laurel Heights Church of Christ in McAllen, Texas. My name is Warren Berkeley. We are beginning a study with this video in Ecclesiastes chapter 1. Let's read Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, and then we'll introduce our study. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? You know, there's really nothing in the Bible exactly like the book of Ecclesiastes. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John enjoy some obvious similarity. The books of the prophets contain similar themes and structure. 1st and 2nd Kings are alike, but there is nothing much like Ecclesiastes in all the Bible, and it is extremely difficult to outline. It doesn't have the common flow or thought or structure or sequence that we may see in other books in the Bible. It may even seem to be disjointed at times, or depressing or difficult, especially your first read. Here's the most valuable thing you can do to better understand Ecclesiastes. Read it in one sitting. Individual reading speed varies, but for most of us, I would think, in less than 45 minutes, you can read the entire book. And if you will do that, I can promise the theme will emerge. And if you do it several times, it will be even clearer. And you'll be in a good position to navigate the individual chapters and statements and passages in Ecclesiastes. Read the entire book through, and you'll put yourself at great advantage. I've known people who read one chapter and got discouraged and close the book. Far better if you will read Ecclesiastes in one sitting. It will flow in a very clear direction toward the conclusion. Let's go to the end of the story and see what the conclusion is. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. That's the conclusion Solomon is working toward. Now, let me say this. The best possible experience is to learn this early in life. Fear God and keep His commandments, for there will be judgment. And avoid all of the trial and error in life, the experimentation, the damaging journeys into common sin. Order your life under the sun here on earth with full acknowledgement of and obedience to the Creator, recognizing there will be judgment. That's the best way to live your life, and the earlier you begin that, the better. And because of Jesus Christ, we can respond to God in the manner described. The man who wrote this book had the capacity and opportunity and revelation to learn this early and to engage all his life toward this ultimate purpose, but he didn't do that. And here he tells the story of how he finally realized that the whole duty of man is to fear God and keep His commandments. Quickly, let's cover some introductory information. The author, I believe, is Solomon. Verse 1 says, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Verse 12, the writer says he was king over Israel in Jerusalem. The lifestyle of the rich and the famous described in chapter 2 matches only Solomon. My conclusion is this was written by Solomon near the end of his life, which would date the book around 900 to 950 years before Christ. Now, there are two elements of credibility combined in this book. the author's experience, and the author's inspiration. The author's personal experience, while that is subjective, is credible. It lends a tone of credibility to what he says about these journeys that he took looking for fulfillment. 2, more objectively, he is writing by inspiration of the Holy Spirit. It says in chapter 12 and verse 11, this teaching was given to him by one shepherd. The theme, remember what I suggested a few minutes ago, reading the book in one sitting and that theme will emerge. And here's what comes off the page. No matter how exciting life may be here on earth, under the sun, ultimately it has no good meaning without God. It's all vanity. Now, how great it is to learn this when you're young, in the days of your youth. Then spend your life under the sun preparing to meet God when you leave. Solomon took all these side journeys into various earthly pursuits, finding all of them to be empty, striving after when, because God was left out. His report of that experience is given in the book of Ecclesiastes. The word Ecclesiastes means to convene an assembly for the instruction of the people who attend. The word preacher you see in the opening verses, that's koeleth, and that means the convener or teacher of the group. So as we go through this remarkable book, we are being taught by someone who not only had these experiences, but who was inspired by God to document them for our spiritual health. And as we go through this remarkable book, I'll be asking us this question that you see on the screen. Are you trying to get what you really need from under the sun instead of from the maker of the sun? Let's begin at verse 1. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Solomon, the king, functions here as a preacher who, in a manner of speaking, convenes people to receive instruction. He will use words that report his thoughts, his conclusions. He'll tell about his ill-advised behaviors, his bad habits. Often Solomon is not recommending behavior, he's reporting behavior along with his conclusions about those behaviors. It becomes the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Now we come to verse 2 and this intriguing turn of phrase peculiar to Ecclesiastes. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Isn't it immediately clear to the reader, the student, we must talk about the word vanity. We must at this point work very closely with this word. The Hebrew term spelled in English is habel. In English translations, it is variously rendered meaningless, useful, futile, fleeting. In the Christian Standard Bible, absolute futility. I believe it is this simple. When you take into account everything in the entire context of Ecclesiastes, life here on earth without God has no ultimate meaning. It is therefore meaningless, futile, useless, or as it reads in the English Standard, vanity. It is interesting and helpful to know that in Hebrew expressions, when superlatives were required, you would use the word twice, but connected as a phrase, vanity of vanities. The most notable example of this outside of Ecclesiastes is holy of holies. This is how Hebrews expressed intensity. So Solomon begins by telling us life here on earth without God, just under the sun, is not just vanity, It is vanity of vanities. I said earlier, no matter how exciting our life may seem to be here under the sun, it has no good meaning without God. We are all headed to judgment with God on the throne. Verse 3, what does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? This is very much like the age-old question that philosophers have written so much about, and songwriters and poets have returned to. What's it all about? The question is brought up mostly for effect. At this place, no answer is expected here. It is like a writer or speaker saying to people, here's what we're going to think about. What's it all about? What's life all about? And if life is just about what's under the sun, then it's futile. At verse 3, we come to what might be called one of the most important phrases in the book, under the sun. Look further into chapter 1. It's all over chapter 1. What does it mean, under the sun? It means here on earth. But as context will confirm, Solomon's talking about life here on earth without God. That's vanity of vanities. See, that takes us back to the fundamental question. Are you trying to get what you really need from under the sun instead of from the maker of the sun? If I'm living just for what I can get here on earth under the sun, if I'm toiling and searching and trying to find answers and fulfillment under the sun without God, Solomon is saying, I tried that and it didn't work for me and it won't work for you. Nothing works well without God. Vanity of vanities. Life here without God is a wisp, a vapor, a puff of wind, a mere breath. Nothing you could get your hands on. The nearest thing to zero. This is vanity of vanities. I just quoted from Derek Kidner. Later in Ecclesiastes, it will be clear everything here can have meaning if God is in your heart, your plans, your purpose, and your hope. Ronald Reagan said, without God, democracy will not and cannot endure. But not only as it pertains to government, when you take God out of something, that something is not what it could be. It is vanity. When you take God out, there's always a great loss. Take Him out of your family, take Him out of government, take Him out of the church, take God out of religion, medicine, economics, marriage, parenting, you'll wind up with vanity. If your life is only about what's under the sun, what's here on earth, if you have no relationship with the Creator of the sun, there is vanity. So when we read the Bible and study the New Testament, as we learn to respond to God as He has directed and be daily disciples of Christ, all of that is about life, value, meaning, purpose, eternity. Let's look at another word in verse 3, gain or profit. The word is used 9 times in Ecclesiastes. It means what's left at the end. Gain or profit, that's what's left at the end. My grandfather had a general store in Arkansas in the 1930s and 40s. He had no accounting software, and at the end of the week he would take his gross cash on hand, take out of that what he owed to wholesalers and his cost, and what was left was what he could take home. That was his profit. If life under the sun here on earth is all you have, without God, what's left is nothing, no profit. Ecclesiastes captures the futility and frustration of trying to live here under the sun without God. What a message that is. If you're watching this video with a group, here's some things you can pause and talk about. Do you think Ecclesiastes would be a useful tool for evangelism? Under what circumstance would this teaching be timely for Christians today? Are there people who know God only from a distance? How would this book help them? God wants us in His life to be ready to meet Him in the end. And that's what we're going to discover as we go through Ecclesiastes. Here are some facts we will encounter. Earthly existence without God, we already know, is vanity. Self-indulgence is temporary and empty. Wisdom and toil without God, no profit. Being alone is risky. Chapter 5 and verse 2, we are not God. Funerals are better than parties in chapter 7, and getting old is hard in chapter 12. But the greatest of all facts, we can fear God and keep His commandments to cancel earthly vanity. Are we trying to get what we need from under the sun instead of from the Maker of the sun? Thank you for being with us.